Here we go. So, good morning, everybody. This is Julie Taylor. I'm with BOMA Oakland East Bay staff, and I'm your executive director. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what we're talking about. Our education work group has, we did some surveying, and everybody was talking about how they needed a little bit of wellness and how to handle these stressful times together. And to be prepared for how to make it through COVID-19. So we reached out, let's see, go to this slide. So we reached out to some of my former colleague, Jeff Hurt, and we put together a series of 4 Wellness Wednesdays. As always, we try to have everybody on video if you can. If not, that's okay too. We understand everybody has those days. Please keep yourself muted, and we're going to be using the question area for questions. And we'll be sending out a SurveyMonkey later today. So this is a little bit about our facilitators. Jeff is the Chief Epiphany Officer at Empowered Epiphanies. Say that 3 times fast. Jeff is a noted digital engagement and learning strategic and governance thought leader and consultant. I work with Jeff at my former organization to revamp our annual conference that had about 3,000 people and 100,000 square feet of 280 exhibitors or something like that. And Jeff came in and worked with our faculty and our speakers and trained them, and we totally pivoted our education from someone just standing up on a stage talking at you to engagement and using adult learning practices. So I love Jeff, and I've learned so much from Jeff. And so I'm really excited to have him here today. And one of his colleagues, Dee O'Neill, is the founder of Neurocognitive Fitness. She is a cognitive psychologist, neuroscientist, and the founder of Neurocognitive Fitness. So I am going to turn it over to them and let Jeff, I'm going to stop my sharing and let Jeff share his screen so we can get started.
You got it. Just a second. I do. I'm trying to pull those up. Here we go. So, can you see that now, Julie?
I can.
All right. I'm going to start. I want to thank you for your time today. Dee and I appreciate it very much, and we want to thank you for your mental engagement right up front. As much mental engagement you put into this is what you'll get out of this. And we want to know, where in the world are you? Would you tell us, are you at home? Are you in an office? Tell me what you see. If you can see anything out your closest window. We just had a conversation about this, but I'm still curious. Text it in to us. Would you text it in to us, please? I'm going to pull the chat box back up if I can. Julie, you may have to help me here. Why don't you read responses that come in for me?
Of course. Well, I commented that I was at home living under orange skies. Mark is in San Francisco in his office.
Okay.
Andrew is in San Francisco. Liz is at home in orange skies. Orange skies seem to be a theme today in the Bay Area. And Noelle is as well at home. Gina is in her home office looking outside, and she sees her passion fruit vine and icky sky in San Jose. And Sawyer, otherwise known as Jenna, is at home with orange skies as well.
Orange skies. Dee and I are in Dee's house, and she has an entire room full of windows, and we hate to say it, but we see sun, nice weather. We had rain last night. So I want to make an agreement with you. Hope you'll make the same agreement with both of us in this presenter tuning agreement. We believe in the law of click. This presentation veers in a direction that doesn't meet your needs. You get a text, you get a phone call. Just need to skip on out of this because it's not working for you. You have the right to do that. Don't feel like you have to be courteous. You're adults. Take care of your needs. Put those mobile devices around you on vibrate, please. Texting, typing, social sharing is welcome. You're welcome to social share anything Dee and I share with you. Let's be considerate and not social share anything anybody else shares unless they give you permission. We're going to use Twitter this morning, tweeting to others as you would have them tweet into you. Gee, wouldn't we have a different world if that worked? Tweet something good before you tweet anything bad from the presentation, and let's make understanding the science of stress and the science of pressure and what all goes on, the goal for this morning, And this is a safe space to agree, disagree, ponder, and questioning. You've got an expert in the room with you digitally. Dee is the expert in this stuff. And she has done quite a bit about stress herself and talking about it and studying it from the scientific point of view, what's going on in your brain. And finally, I'm going to give you a free pass. And with this free pass, you can use it as frequently and as often as you want. In this free pass, if we ask you to do something you don't want to do it, you just ignore us. You don't have to type in a response. I'm going to switch decks real quick. There's me. There's a little bit about me. That's what I look like. And how do I get out of this? There's some of the organizations I've worked for. Here we go. I'm going to switch to this other deck. I'm going to turn it over to Dee. And Dee, anything else you want to add to it?
Well, no, I mean, just Julie and all of you at BOMA, thanks so much for joining us today. And want to just kind of give props for doing a Wellness Wednesday. I think that corporations like yours that are acknowledging the importance of taking care of people and sharing some of the latest science is such a wonderful thing to be offering. So congratulations on that.
And Dee, tell them a little bit about the company you own.
Yeah, so Neurocognitive Fitness is my private practice. I'm a licensed counselor. Years ago, got interested in just the brain-body relationship. The last 7 years, I've been working at a place called the Brain Performance Institute that's all about taking brain science into corporations and into commercialization type of modalities. So my passion, my drive is really sharing with people tools to manage stress, to measure stress, to kind of have a better sense of how much do we have. And in today's world, just listening to you all talk about the fires, and we're in a global pandemic. I mean, there's so many things going on that I want to kind of preface the conversation today that we'll talk about ways to manage stress. And I think the topic of performing under pressure and when it matters the most, that maybe now is when it matters the most, when sort of so much is out of our control, focusing on what can we control, just to kind of take back that sense of power and empowerment. So one of the large topics that we talk about is even maximizing stress. How do we use stress to our advantage? As high performers, a lot of you may know that there are times when that extra cortisol and adrenaline in your system helps you perform better. I see Mark nodding. So yeah, you kind of get that sense that, yeah, maybe I kind of like that extra gear. But sometimes, especially when it's so chronic like it is now, it takes a toll. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. Just a stat to open up with, studies have shown about 3 in 4 Americans report having at least one stress symptom in the last month. This is a pre-COVID statistic. So I think this was actually from a talk I gave back in October. So I think probably now it's 5 out of 4 Americans, if that's such a thing. I think we're all experiencing stress, particularly in the last few months. But why don't I have you kind of put in the chat box, and if Julie, you'll kind of read the responses to us. I'd like you to reflect for a moment for yourself. In order, what are the top 2 stressors for you right now, if you wanted to share? When you think about the things that are on your mind that are causing you negative stress, what are those top 2 things?
So while they're typing, I'll tell you mine. In the past year, I have sold my parents' house, sold their estate, moved them into my sister's house, went through a divorce, which was 10 months of hell, sold my house, moved into a new house, bought a new house, and started a new company in the past 10 months. So those are my stressors.
Yeah, big one.
Big
that was
ones.
more than 2.
That was more than 2.
Yeah, we're one comment has been balancing 3 kids at home and work.
Yeah, those parents out there, I don't have kids. I can't imagine. I've kind of loved working from home. I can't imagine how it would be having either little ones or older ones at home as well.
She does have dogs. You'll learn about those in a minute.
Yeah, they're a handful.
And she remodeled her bathroom and in her rental property.
Wow.
Okay.
And Noelle just let you know that there's a fire alarm going off in her building. So that's a stressor for the morning.
Okay.
Anybody else have any stressors you want to share? Oh, one just came in. Feeling isolated, working from home with my dog and cat. I'm a people person, but wine does help.
You know, the whole social distancing thing, I wish it was called something else because it creates isolation. And one of the things we know about brain health is we need other people. We are hardwired to connect to humans. And really critical, D, if you want to expound on any of that.
Yeah, that's kind of a whole separate hour-long talk on its own. That one of the studies I love to cite is that it was shown that loneliness can be as predictive of morbidity, of actually dying, as heart disease. It truly does take a toll on us psychologically, physiologically. So in today's world, we just know it's having a huge impact. Particularly, I've been hearing more for teenagers. Like, can you imagine being a teenager today where your friends are your world and they're just so disconnected? Thankfully, I guess they had the technology that we didn't really have as much when we were teenagers, but we just don't know what the longer term effects might be for this generation who isn't having that sense of connection. Okay, those are all the comments, and we'll just jump into some of the tools. And thank you for sharing some of those. There are so many that are, some sounded like maybe.
I have another one if you want me to throw it out to you, Dee. Supporting people in your life and the company you work for, and how the two conflict sometimes.
Yeah, kind of bringing in that same social component, but also as a leader, how do we kind of be our best every day and show up in a way that helps inspire and support others? Very important. And so let's jump into sort of what happens when we're stressed, what's happening to our body, and sort of how often is it happening. So from this study, it showed about half people notice they lie awake at night. I think we were talking right before we jumped online, just how sleep is being affected. I find myself, and I've been talking to friends and family, for some reason I'm waking up at 2 and 3 a.m. like many days, just sort of mind racing, can't sort of turn off some of the worry thoughts. So that affects so much of how we feel the next day. About a third then feeling nervous, anxious, irritable, angry, just fatigue, exhausted, just sheer exhaustion from this unrelenting stress, and sort of feels like every day there's maybe something new that causes more stress. And just to acknowledge you all being in California right now with the fires and just on top of a pandemic and everything else going on, it's sort of layering. And something unique that's happening with COVID-19 is oftentimes back in the fall when I would give talks like this, people could bring up subjects about their job, or maybe someone sick was in the family. But with COVID-19 and this global pandemic, we're all in the same sort of stress boat, as I said last night on a podcast. We're all in the same stress boat where it's not just maybe worried about your child or your loved one or coworkers, but we're all dealing with the same level of stress, worried about ourselves, worried about our loved ones, our coworkers, our jobs, the future. So it's kind of a very unprecedented level of pandemic stress, essentially.
Well, buying groceries can be stressful anyway. Even if you're buying them online, how long is it going to take to get them? Is what I want available or what I need available?
Yeah. And I'll just add one more piece of brain science there. I don't think I have it in this talk. It's such a normal thing to feel stress. I think sometimes people are like, well, why am I so stressed? But I'd like to really leave with a message of your brain is wired to help you survive. Your brain is not wired to help you have joy and vitality and enjoy life necessarily. So I think it's important to acknowledge that your brain is doing what it's supposed to do when you feel stressed. It's just not wired to have that day in and day out for months and weeks or years at a time. That's when it really takes a toll. So I think it's so important to use some of these super simplistic strategies that we're going to talk about today. And there may be things that you're already doing, but hopefully it will highlight some of the science behind why it works. And then maybe you'll take away a couple of new ones that you hadn't thought about. And for yourself and for the people that you care about, you're welcome to share them with them as well. And so stress, and this was actually in the fall again, stress was considered the health epidemic of the 21st century. That might now be COVID-19. We might have a new health epidemic, but certainly the stress around this current situation is going to be a secondary health epidemic of the 21st century. I'd like you to think for a moment, when we're saying this word stress, and you think to yourself, I'm stressed, or we're stressed, I have stress at work, what does that mean? How would you define stress? And go ahead and write that in the chat box. What is stress when you use that word?
Good question. I think we often confuse stress and pressure. There's good stress and bad stress.
Yeah. so many components to this. So Jeff, how do you define as they're writing their answers?
So stress is when my brain perceives a threat and goes into hyperdrive to save myself from that threat.
Yeah.
And I'll let you pick up on that after Julie reads some comments to us. What about you, Julie?
For me, I'm finding that it's really hard to focus and I make a list of things I want to get done. And I still have the list of 3 things that I wanted to do around the house last week that still haven't gotten done. And it's not that hard. Hang a picture, fix a something, fix a frame that's broken, just really simple things. Other people are commenting high energy mode, stress, panic on a deadline, and frustrating feeling that is difficult to process.
Oh, good.
Yeah, really good. And so I think it's helpful to kind of acknowledge that sometimes we're using that word, and as you can tell from all your definitions, we all define it and see it a little bit differently. And I love that it was everything from pressure, worrying about things, to even somebody said high energy mode. And as Jeff alluded to, there are different ways from a science perspective, and especially brain science, that we look at stress. But I want to go back to really how it was originally defined. This is from a scientist back, I think, in the early 1900s. Stress was defined as the non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it.
Non-specific response.
Non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it.
What does that mean, non-specific response?
Well, what I love about it is even the early scientists, and this was, keep in mind, this was studies they were doing in a lab with animals. I think it was with mice, where they were stressing these animals. Believe it or not, all animals experience stress just like we do. It's a survival response. The way they stress the animals most typically is they have them on a surface, and then the surface is glass, so they think they're going to fall. So they truly have that physiological stress response. But the reason they made it non-specific response was because it was different for different people and different animals, I guess. And what they found was, so it was very general. And I think what I've seen over time is we've kind of made it much more specific of here's what it is for me. But I like to kind of zoom out to that more general definition of non-specific response of the body to any demand made upon it. And you'll see once we start talking about the strategies, how this is so key, because maybe then the tools we can use can help change a very non-specific response. How we interpret it might change the way that we experience it. Rather than labeling it something else, maybe if we label it something differently, it changes the experience of it. I read somewhere recently this meme of sort of like, life isn't stressful, it's how we're interpreting, that experience. Although I think that's hard to apply to situations that we're currently in, but I want to keep in mind that normal stressors are a little bit different than our kind of current situation. And so this is one of our collaborators I love to quote, and the way that he defined stress and sort of the way I've also embraced it. That stress is really the feeling that the demands made on you exceed your capacity to cope with them.
That word cope, the coping mechanism. Having lived and loved somebody who had mental health illness, they lost their coping skills. And it was really interesting to see how stressors, things that we would normally come upon day to day, would just take my ex-spouse down fast because it's no longer coping, your capacity to cope with them.
Yeah. I mean, two words on there I think that really jump out, especially from a mental health perspective, is a feeling. So it's an interpretation. It's that own individual experience of it. The feeling that the demands made on you exceed your capacity. And capacity, I think, is so key from a psychological perspective that implies, I think, that it can be changed. That whether it is just someone without any sort of mental health concern, but even someone with, that maybe there are ways that we can increase that capacity so that we can respond differently and cope with it more effortlessly.
One of the things that I learned when I started studying brain science of stress and things like that is I didn't have to believe the feeling that I had, that the feelings could lie to me. from the facts.
Mhm.
It was one of the most freeing things that I could tell my brain, oh, that's not true. Look at the evidence, Jeff. That is not true, because my brain was perceiving, feeling a threat, perceiving it.
Yeah.
We'll
It's
get
that
into that a little
perception.
more.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go into a little bit about how, with that definition in place, and then we'll talk a little bit about how stress affects the brain, and then we'll jump right into what these couple of strategies are. I'm assuming many of you maybe haven't studied brain science, so I'm gonna just do kind of a quick little primer on how stress really affects the brain. And as we're sitting here looking at my bookcase, I'm such a neuroscience nerd. Thankfully, I found my soulmate in that in Jeff. So all my books are about brain science and neuroscience, and it's truly what I just love to do. So, but I really like breaking it down into more practical and digestible information. So this is a graphic of what a brain looks like. Obviously, it's not gray and blue necessarily like that. It is kind of gray. It's called gray matter. But what I like to point out here is there are certain parts of the brain, different lobes of the brain that we talk about in brain science. The very back of the brain is called the occipital lobe, where we process our vision, and then parietal lobe right on top of that, kind of like where a crown might sit on the back of your head, is responsible for processing sensory information. And that very front part of the brain that you see highlighted there in blue is what's called our executive functioning, our prefrontal cortex. And just in the chat box really quick, Julie, if everyone would enter just kind of a scale of 1 to 5, how much have you heard about this idea of frontal lobe executive functions? 1, you've never heard any of this, and 4 or 5, you've heard a little bit about this idea of frontal lobe and executive functioning, just so I get a gauge of where you're all at. 1, like what are these words you're using? And 4 and 5, I'm familiar, I've read some of this.
We have a couple 1s, 2 1s, 2 2s, a 3, and a 4.
Okay, great. So if this is brand new, I'm happy to have an offline conversation to explain it more if it's of interest. But I'll just highlight that our executive functions, think of an executive, so the boss of the brain is that frontal part of the brain. It's the largest part of the brain, and it's responsible for these high-level tasks: problem solving, innovative thinking, emotional intelligence, being mentally flexible and agile, making decisions, regulating stress.
And interesting enough, the next webinar that we're going to do with you guys is called Going Full Frontal.
That's
so
right.
We'll go into detail about this.
Yeah, we've kind of built these 4 to really build on each other. So we'll kind of come back to this idea too as we go over these next few weeks. That's a great point. So important parts about the frontal lobe: it's the last part of your brain to fully develop. As a quick sort of other brain quiz for you, at what age do you think all these functions become really accessible to somebody? When do you think people's frontal lobe is fully developed? What age?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
When are people making good problem solving and good innovative thinking? When is their emotional intelligence fully developed? When do they start regulating stress well?
We have, you can tell Noelle and I work next to each other because we both said 25. We have a 22 and a 21. Any other ideas? Oh, 50. Okay, yeah, you can feel that. Anybody else have a guess or an idea?
Interesting.
All right, Dee, you have a couple 20s, a 30, a 50, and 25s, 21, 22s. So what is it, Dee?
That's
Okay.
the bad news.
Okay, all good answers. So what the science shows us is our brain, our frontal lobe is fully developed about age 25. So Julie and you guys are right on. That's when the frontal lobe is fully developed, meaning it's kind of all the neurons there are really well connected and firing really well. And if you think about that, it makes sense, right? Generally, it's the age we've graduated college, maybe we're into our first job, and it's really important that these skills are online by then. If you think about how old you have to be to rent a car, it's generally 25 in most states. Even rental car companies know that you're not really making good decisions or solving problems well. They don't want to have you take their car off the lot if your frontal lobe is not fully developed. And I'll often get questions like, well, isn't it later in men? That's a whole separate conversation. So we could talk about that on a different webinar. But essentially age 25 is about when it happens. But I love that somebody said 50. I'll be 51 next month. And so I think the idea that these aren't static things. You don't kind of become mentally flexible and then stay there, hopefully. You know, what we know about neurogenesis and the idea that we're always building new brain cells is that these things always get better. I feel like I'm just becoming really a lot better about making decisions and judgment and being innovative. So I think it's something that we can always get better at and always learn and grow from.
Sure. So where is the limbic system in the brain, the emotional part of the brain? I know
Yeah.
the emotional intelligence in the frontal lobe, but we manage it. But where's the emotional part of our brain?
Yeah, so this little, on this next slide here, oh, it didn't show up. Well, if you can imagine, oh, one little graphic didn't show up. So if you can imagine right there in the middle of the brain, I'm pointing at it, but you can't see, the middle of the brain, where that sort of little space is what's called the amygdala. It's the limbic system part of the brain. It's the most primitive part of the brain. If you've heard different stories about like the monkey brain or the
Dinosaur brain.
It's truly the part of the brain that notices what's not right in our environment. And I usually have it as a little red circle, but when we get stressed, the amygdala, the limbic, the emotional part of our brain takes over. And that's why I have that sort of frontal lobe stuff not highlighted anymore, because when we get stressed, and just think about times you've been stressed, the emotional part takes over and we don't make good decisions. We aren't really great at problem solving and being innovative when we're under really stressful situations. It's an either or phenomenon. Either our frontal lobe is online, really activated, or our amygdala, our limbic part of the brain is more active. Both can't be firing at the same time.
So I think that's really critical. And amygdala, I jokingly call it Amy for short. Amy's neither male nor female. But I remember how to spell it. Amy G. Dalla. That's how I know how to spell it. It's such a strange word. And Amy is responsible for your emotional hijacks. Amy is the one responsible when your spouse, your coworker, or customer emails you and you read the email and you immediately fire back another email to them without thinking, because the emotions are high, trust is low, emotions are high, and you send them an email and you hit send. And about an hour later, you go back and read it and go, oh crap, why did I do that? That's the amygdala. And as she's saying, when you're in the emotional part of the brain, you don't have the accessibility to the executive functions. You cannot think straight. You cannot make a logical, good decision. So, and when you're in the executive functions, you're not in the emotions part of the brain. So it's one or the other, and that's what's critical in emotional intelligence piece, is learning how to manage the amygdala, Amy, and how to manage the stress and how to leverage stress correctly. So go ahead and show them. I love the next slide. The puppies.
Yeah, so let me go into sort of a story about the puppies to kind of highlight how this animal brain is a little bit different than our human brain. And I'd love you to think about, just for yourself, a time in your life when you were stressed, when you experienced stress, and what happened. To Jeff's point, maybe you said things you wish you hadn't said. Maybe you, or maybe you couldn't think of something to say because just in that moment you didn't have access to the words, or you couldn't remember something because that frontal lobe is just offline. And then maybe later, once you calm down, you thought, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. And then or you thought, oh, I wish I had had this comeback, but I just literally couldn't think clearly in the moment. That's that amygdala hijack where that emotional brain's taken over. So these are my two little sweet mini schnauzers, Boomer and Lonnie. They're brother and sister. They're pretty cute babies. And I'll give a quick example of what happened. This is how they spend most of their time. Just kind of laying around. That's Boomer. Pretty much owns the king size bed. He's king of the house. This is Lonnie. She's the goofy one with her tongue hanging out there. She's over in the corner doing that right now. But I want to give an example or come back to this situation for you to think about for yourself, and then I'll share my experience with the puppies. But think about a time when you felt really stressed. And the example I'll give for me and the puppies was a few months ago. We were in our back room, and I have a lot of windows. And as we're just sitting there in the evening relaxing, I noticed one raccoon kind of coming literally up to the back door, up to the patio glass door, and just looking in at us. So I kind of panicked. My stress response is generally freezing. we say around the amygdala hijack, it's fight or flight or freeze. And you might have a certain way that you tend to respond to stress. Do you want to come out fighting? Do you freeze, or do you flee the situation?
And there's another F that I like to say too, but it's sexual reproduction. You can figure out what that F is.
Oh, that's like the fourth F. Well, and another one is just friend. Maybe if you're able to engage that emotional intelligence, maybe you are able to shift into friending, as opposed to even freezing or fighting or fleeing. So this stressful situation for us, I panicked. I know some people love raccoons. I'm an animal lover, but raccoons for some reason just sort of kind of give me goosebumps. And then I noticed there wasn't one raccoon. There was literally like a family of 5 or 6 coming up and getting some of the nuts off the patio. And then the dogs notice and just start going crazy, and they want to go out there and attack them. So huge stress response. We were all amygdala hijacked. And then the raccoons kind of hung out for a while. But then after a little while, the puppies were back laying down, sleeping, doing like they generally do. I literally couldn't sleep that night. This was before COVID. So for that, but thinking about what were the raccoons doing out there? Are they going to be there in the morning? I literally couldn't sleep thinking about them. But the dogs very quickly went back to not even thinking about the raccoons. So the way we're normally wired for a stress response is it happens, we respond, and we go back to homeostasis, or kind of back to baseline. As kind of perseverative human beings, where we tend to think about things over and over again, we can't get that thought out of our head that's so stressful. Then we lose sleep and we have this chronic stress response. So you have your kind of visual situation in mind. What happens when you're in this stressful situation? What do you notice happens to you? Go ahead and write in the chat box. What do you experience in your body and your thinking when you're under a stressful situation?
Interesting. My hands start sweating. My ears turn red.
Oh, yeah.
People know when I'm stressed because my ears turn red, and they will know before I will. And my heart starts racing.
Heart racing.
Really
Yeah, let me read off a few. Heart races is common. A couple people have said can't sleep, constant thinking about the situation, face flushes, sweating, later tummy issues, inability to make good decisions, and anxiety.
And one thing Dee hasn't said yet, which I'm just going to throw in, her pets have a limbic system. They don't have a frontal cortex. They don't have what we humans have to go into the executive functions. They miss it. That's why dogs are so loyal to us, because they have this limbic system. And they are extremely loyal to their owners.
Right. Yeah, Boomer and Lonnie are not making a lot of great decisions or solving a lot of problems generally. They tend to just be happy when they see somebody they like. They attack Jeff when he walks in the house. And they're just happy when they get a treat. They're just, to your point, full emotional love bugs.
And when she said attack, she meant they attacked me in love.
Yeah, attacks them and kisses. They're only 10 pounds each, so they're pretty small. So you have those phenomenons, and it's individual for different people to some degree, but we tend to have patterns that we see. So generally, as many of you said, there's almost like a feeling of like frenetic energy, that heart racing. There's often like a feeling of pressure and tension. Some people might feel like their shoulders start getting really tight. Constriction, we might feel like we're underwater, like the breathing becomes really shallow and kind of panicky. And often it's brain fog. That idea of like, I can't think clearly, I can't find the right words or the right situation. The other example I'll show of Sweet Boomer here, when there's a thunderstorm, he has that full physiological, physical response. He starts shaking so badly when there's a thunderstorm. And I usually know about an hour before a storm is coming, because he comes over with his little tail tucked and he's shaking like crazy. And then I'm like, oh, there's the thunder. So the thunder vest helps kind of calm him down. But it's very much a physical manifestation of his stress response. Now, his sister Lonnie doesn't even notice it. So again, it's very individual for different people. And now, before we get into the couple of strategies to share with you, I want you to think of it from this frame and think about a really exciting situation that you've had in your life, something that was kind of thrilling that you found as just an exhilarating situation. Right in the chat box, what do you experience during those exciting and like awesome situations?
Oh, the adrenaline.
You still feel the adrenaline.
And oftentimes your heart races still again. You feel a sense of excitement or apprehension.
Mm.
Julie, what about you? What about others?
I was just going to say when I went through a rapid going in the Grand Canyon, just that exhilaration and the just almost like you're out of your body, just looking down and seeing everything, but just exhilaration. What does everybody else have? Those fingers typing.
I'm curious too. Nicole, are you outside or is that just a great backdrop that you put up?
Wow.
Noelle, I mean, excuse me.
It's just a backdrop. I'm not really in LA.
You don't want to show us the true sky outside. Gotcha.
She's our Trojan. USC.
What do you?
All right, so I think people are using their pass point right there. So,
Okay.
oh, hooking a big trout on a fly rod, says our outdoorsman.
How do you feel when you're outside?
Well, and so I'll go through it here kind of. So what's interesting and people will start to notice, and kind of Julie, as you explained in your example, generally when we have exciting situations, people feel like it's the same things, right? My heart races, I feel sort of lost in the moment, just like with the stressful situation. So it's that, again, the idea, think back to the definition of stress, non-specific response to any demand made on the body. So whether it's a stressful situation or exciting, there's demands being made on your mental, physical being because of this situation that's outside the normal range. But you might still have that feeling of excitement, but it feels different than like frenetic. It might feel kind of exciting. Think about kids, right? Everything is just fun and exciting, high energy. You might still be feeling like there's kind of a weight on you, but it might feel more interesting or exhilarating, as you explained it, Julie. And then you might still feel like there's sort of breathing changes, but it might feel a bit more at a deeper level of breathing. And then it's more of an expansive feeling. It's not the brain fog. It's more of like a feeling of largeness. I have a whole separate talk too that maybe we can do after this series about this new research around awe in the brain. Sounds like that what you were kind of describing, Julie, at the Grand Canyon, right? You're experiencing something that's almost outside your realm of comprehension, and awe is becoming known as like the ultimate emotion that we can experience. And how it changes our body and our brain. So I have a whole talk around the brain science of wonder and awe.
And you know, as kids, we seem to embrace awe and wonder, but somewhere along the line, we grow into adults and we lose some of that childlike curiosity about life.
Yes.
And we see any pressure on us as a negative instead of, well, this could be a good opportunity to try something new.
Yeah. And also just because we're so busy with so much going on, we almost just don't even notice maybe opportunities for awe. So that's some of the things that we actually get into. And so to close that point, this is Boomer and Lonnie. Boomer's shaking here, you can't really tell. He's shaking just like he does during thunderstorms, but this is getting picked up from the vet. So they're super excited, that's why they have their bow ties. They just got groomed. And so they're excited to be back in the car knowing that they're done with that sort of terrifying experience. But so they're having the same physiological response, but it's a different exciting as opposed to threatening type of stress response. And so this is something kind of back to the neuroscience, this idea of Yerkes-Dodson law. These were two researchers who found that stress isn't always a bad thing, that maybe there's a sweet spot of stress. On the left side of that graphic is really kind of boredom and just not doing anything. We need a little bit of that adrenaline, cortisol to feel alive, to feel like we have meaning and purpose and some drive in our life. But it's kind of a short window until it starts to feel like more of a threat or more of an uncontrolled stress. So we want to find more ways to be in that sweet spot, have just enough, have experiences that are exciting and exhilarating and awesome because they're great to have and life is short, why not? But also the effects on our brain and body are actually really positive when we have the right amount of those. It's called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And so take a look at this picture, and in the chat box, when you see this picture, what comes to mind of what's going on here? What's happening in this picture? Just write a few words there in the chat box. Jeff, what's going on in this picture? What would
Well,
you say?
I'm looking at her fingers, wondering how clenched they are there and how high up she is. So for me, this would be a stressor.
Okay, it looks stressful to you.
It does to me,
Okay.
yes. Not something I would enjoy doing necessarily.
Okay.
Okay, the first word that comes to mind is no. Um,
Not a fan.
extreme challenge, climbing but hanging on by your fingertips, pushing your body to climb. This would be very stressful for me.
Hanging on by the fingertips. I like that. Yes, boy, that's a great analogy.
Yeah. So what's interesting is there have been studies to show when large groups are shown images like this, that generally half of the group will say things just like that, like, oh my God, that's stressful. People kind of zoom into the details, like, is that rock splitting there? Is she about to, pull those rocks apart and then fall? Definitely the grip she has on her fingers. But the other half, and especially if you're not a fan of rock climbing, you might be like, oh, like someone said no, because your own life experience, your own bias comes into play for any interpretation of any image or life event. But about the other half of the room, and I don't know if anybody there did think about this, was more like, oh, how cool. She's about to summit that rock. She's about to pull herself up and over. And maybe that would be people who have experienced it and know there is a positive side to rock climbing. That's, I guess, why people do it. It's exhilarating, it's exciting, and it's athletic. Maybe she's standing on the ground there and she's just sort of, squatting or just sort of doing a relaxed yoga pose or something. So, and many times people will see both of those perspectives, but go with one based on maybe just their current situation. So just the idea that, again, it's not, everyone saw the same thing, but you might interpret it differently for lots of different reasons.
I don't know if you caught what Dee said. There's an important statement she made there. Our own life experiences often are our biases, because we will give more credibility to our life experiences than we should. And our life experiences are not based on the scientific method, not based on science. They are our perceived thoughts about it. And I think one of the things that she'll talk about, I think, shortly is reframing past experiences, particularly from our childhood, because we saw them through a child's eyes, through adults, reframing them, how they made us better than we are today, a negative experience.
Yeah, and I think one of our upcoming webinars is going to talk about bias a lot more, because we'll talk about how it's unconscious. We all have bias. If you think you don't, you might have more than the average person. So it's truly like just the way our brain is wired. It's just a natural phenomenon. So we'll talk about really how that happens, why it happens, and really how it's something that we can use to our advantage. And so just to kind of wrap up that idea and then jump into these last two strategies with the last few minutes we have with you guys, this kind of wraps up this idea of metacognition. This is from a psychologist who described it as thinking about your thinking while you're thinking to improve your thinking. That's a metacognition. How nice would it be if everyone you came across in your daily life was thinking about their thinking while they were doing that thinking and improving it along the way. But this is really a very advanced skill.
And to think about like this, on your to-do list, the things that you had to do today, did you put down, think about your thinking? We don't give credibility to spending time to thinking and reflecting on what we're doing because we see it as non-productive. And we need to give more time to thinking about our thinking while we're thinking to improve our thinking so that we're doing the right task at the right time for the right people, moving forward at the right place. And we need to give more credibility to thinking because we will avoid thinking. Our brain wants to avoid thinking because thinking is work. And the amygdala doesn't like us to think because it uses up the body's resources. And the amygdala no longer has those body's resources in case the amygdala needs to go into fight, flight, freeze, friending, or sexual reproduction.
Right. It's that constant battle, right? Am I in emotional state or thinking state? And to your, but this is the workout that builds that frontal lobe capacity. And it is that deeper level thinking that we sometimes just are so busy that we don't have time to do that. So our two strategies that we're going to share, there are so many, and I'm so glad we have several other sessions with you all because we're going to keep building and offering new ones. There's so many more than we could possibly pack into a 1 hour session. So the first one that Jeff kind of mentioned is such a simple strategy of reframing to reset our mindset and emotions when something is coming up that you feel like you know is going to be stressful. Is it a meeting you have? Is it you know, going to sleep at night, waking up, and it's still going to be orange skies outside or dark, or who's the next person that's going to get sick from COVID, and not to belittle something, but just for our own sanity, to try to find a different lens to look through that situation so that we calm down the emotional response and have better access to our better thinking. And you may be one of those people who sort of already does that naturally, when it's like, well, the positive here, or on the bright side, like we tend to have that already as something that we do. But the times when you're not able to flip that switch as easily, to kind of more intentionally, how could you look at this differently?
The reframing is critical. And so you really have to become better at recognizing when you might be going into an emotional hijack,
Mm-hmm.
and slowing it down, stopping it, and then reframing the situation so you don't. Because when you do go to emotional hijack, it's going to take a while for you to get out of the emotional hijack, because you're flooding the body with cortisol and adrenaline, norepinephrine.
Yep.
And it takes a while for that to get out of the body for you to think logically again.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought. So when we have that stress response and cortisol, the stress hormone, starts flooding through our body, and what's key from the science of it is that cortisol, which is helpful in the short term, it helps you run away from that threatening lion coming after you, you know, out in the desert. I don't know if lions live in the desert, but you know, that short-term threat. But it's not good if it's still in your body, you know, 6, 8, 10, 15 hours later, because it takes a toll on our body. And for me, this is a perfect time reframing, because that job that I was at for 7 years, I actually was laid off from that job due to the current situation. And I have to very cognitively and intentionally reframe it from the moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is scary, to like, how exciting, this is cool. I get to have a new chapter open. And, you know, just that simple idea of like, this is so stressful. You know, the words we use, the way we describe things, of rather than this is so stressful, to, well, this is a challenge. You know, this is a challenge.
Some of the research from like IHHP with the Institute for Human Health and Potential says it takes 40 minutes for your brain to go back to being able to think logically again when you're flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. 40 freaking minutes. So you, in effect, shouldn't be around another human or make any decisions for 40 minutes. That's a long time. And when you're in emotional hijack, if you can know that, and where I've worked in offices before, my team, we would learn this concept and go, oh, you know what? It looks like to me, Amy's taking over. We're going to give you a break. We're going to come back to you about an hour and a half and talk. But let's take a breather here and step away from it. And everybody just go do what you need to do. We'll come back in an hour and a half. And learning that concept and being aware of it when your friends, when your family, when your colleagues are having an emotional hijack, so that you don't press them, because you can be hijacked again and again and again.
Yeah. And that kind of gets into the second strategy that we'll talk about. To wrap up the reframe, though, I love to point out this Bruce Springsteen story. He was interviewed in a late night interview show years ago, and the interviewer said, you know, do you get stressed before you perform? And he said, oh gosh, yeah, when I was younger, before I was the boss, before I go on stage, you know, I'd be sweating and I would be shaking and I'd forget words to my song. I'd be so stressed. He said, but now I know, after all these years, that all those feelings are my body's way of telling me it's time to rock. So he completely reframed the physical and physiological responses into something that helped him perform better. So rather than him seeing it as a stressful event, he switched his own mindset. He still has the same things. I mean, I still have it. And when I'm going to get up and do a big keynote, I'm shaking, I'm nervous, and I think to myself, I have no idea what I'm going to say. So then I say, it's okay. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be awesome. I truly have to use these tools to reframe. It's time to rock. Yeah. And the second one that Jeff kind of just alluded to is the simple tool of recharging. Before we go into a stressful situation, what works for you best to recalibrate and recharge? For me, it's, you know, sitting somewhere quiet, closing my eyes. We take in so much visual stimulation that it's taxing on the brain. So to kind of recharge that brain power, going somewhere, focusing on some deep breaths that we'll talk about in some future sessions too, how that activates our vagus nerve and calms down our nervous system. So just recharging that, you know, that feeling you get when you look at your cell phone and it has that has that red low battery icon, and you panic a little bit because you can't possibly have a phone with a low battery. But we'll go throughout our day with our brain like on low power and almost like red battery. And so even 5 minutes has been shown to recharge and help you come back refreshed and re-energized to tackle whatever it is at hand.
So what I want you to do in the next just few minutes here, roll this up. What's your biggest takeaway so far from this webinar? What's your biggest takeaway so far from this webinar? Well, what's your biggest takeaway from today that we've shared with you and that you've thought about? You'll just text that in for us. It's a good way for you to actually remember it by putting it into writing. Biggest takeaway.
Something you maybe already knew that was reinforced, something new and interesting, a new insight you had.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few if you're ready for them.
Go for it.
It's time to rock.
Yeah.
Remember to give yourself time to make the right decision under stress. Listen to your body and then rock it. Reclassifying or reframing stress. That I'm not alone with how I'm feeling. And to take care of your brain and emotional stress. And I'm not the only one feeling these feelings.
And one of the things that Dee talks a lot about is brain health and what we need to be doing to keep our brain healthy. Because one thing she alluded to, but she didn't really stress it, is you can grow your brain at any age. You can continue to have a healthy brain and continue to grow it in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s. It's you who either stops it and goes backwards, but you can continue to grow that brain and have a healthy brain. Final words for us, Dee.
Yeah, I love those takeaways. You know, if anything sticks, the idea of even in stressful situations that we have no control over, just what can we control? We can control what we're thinking about in our brain. No one else can control what you're thinking about. So reframing it and just using these tools to recharge. I think I'd hope hopefully we'll see you all back, I think next week. And I'd love to, you know, think about before that, we want to hear if you used a couple of these tools or how you saw it playing out in your life and how you actually use them. Would love that. And any questions, please maybe send to Julie or save for us for next week, and we'll spend some more time on questions for sure.
Julie, we'll turn it over back to you.
Great. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. I totally am so excited. I think that one of the things we do have a session next week, which is full frontal, which I think you guys talked a little bit about, more that executive part of the brain. We'll unpack that a little bit more. And I want to thank everybody for being here. Be sure and tell your friends and colleagues about this series that we're doing. We are going to be recording, we have recorded it, and I'm going to be posting it online. But I want to thank everybody. If you have questions, ideas, please let me know and shoot me an email. Everybody knows how to reach me, and have a great day.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
guys. Go Rocket.
Go Rocket.